What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. I do a lot of research for my What Could Have Been series because it's probably my favorite kind of video to work on. I mean, I love learning about champion development and the process that goes into the champions we have today. But a lot of champions don't have 8 minutes worth of information surrounding them. A lot of them maybe just have 1 or 2 really cool abilities, and I can't turn that into a whole video by itself. So here are some of the best that couldn't make it into their own videos. Some of the coolest and craziest abilities that could have existed in League of Legends. Just before we start, here are some of my favorite comments where I asked what character you guys wish would be added into League of Legends. Today, I want to know which one of these abilities would you like to see added into the game. And if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you don't, please hit that dislike. Anyways, let's get started. Our first ability started out as kind of a bug, but not that kind of bug. We're talking an ability that was on Elise during her development. This ability was in a kit as a replacement for her repel, or at least part of it with the way it worked. During one iteration of her development, Elise actually wasn't able to jump to a target in spider form after casting repel. Instead, what she could do was place webs within the repel area that would ensnare enemies who ran under her. Now this ability was actually really close to making it into the live version of her kit and really does a fantastic job of pulling off her spider theme. However, Elise was being developed back in Season 2, and for those of you who don't remember, back at the time, Riot was releasing a new champion every 2 weeks into the game. So unfortunately, since they wanted to publish Elise by Halloween, this ability had to be scrapped in favor of the current form of her repel, since it was just a little bit too difficult to make work in the time window that they had available. It had a lot of problems involving coding with walls and other sorts of stuff. Really, they just didn't have enough time to make the ability work properly. If Elise was being developed today on the current champion cycles that typically now last as long as they need to make an awesome champion, it's not only possible, but in fact quite likely that this ability would be in her kit now. Our second ability on this list is definitely my favorite because it's an ability that had been previously unreleased actually until about a week or so ago, and probably still would have been unreleased information until I got Riot Skarzar to share the story behind it. So think of this ability as my exclusive piece of info, kind of, and huge thanks to Riot Skarzar for sharing this awesome ability with everyone. And the story behind that is he was doing this Q&A stream with Riot Ghostcrawler on the League community Twitch channel to like 200 viewers or something really small, but I was able to hop in at the last few moments and ask him to share some info on unreleased abilities, and he told us this awesome story that hasn't been shared before since about the original version of what was going to be Fiora's new ultimate for her rework. And what that ultimate did was that Fiora would throw out a glove as a skill shot, very similar to the way Fizz's ultimate gets thrown out, and it would catch onto the first target hit, and then it would teleport Fiora and the champion hit by that glove across the map to some randomly selected location, where no other champions were nearby, and would create a barrier around the two champions and they would have to literally duel. It was like this Pocket Plane almost. You would get teleported far away from everyone and you'd have to just brawl it out within the confines of the barrier. And the loser would end up dead, and the winner gets teleported back to their original location before the duel and comes back with this like crazy Super Saiyan buff for winning and starts to just wreck everyone. Now, as hilarious as this ultimate could have been, it didn't happen because what would end up happening is that Fiora would just use her ultimate on someone who had no chance of winning the duel, typically the enemy support most of the time, and it would be a guaranteed free kill on them, and then you would come back like Super Saiyan Fiora and kill everyone else too. And I mean, you guys thought rework Fiora was overpowered on launch. Oh man, this would have been insane. Because Fiora just wins the duel every time and then murders everyone after that. For our third ability, we're going to get a little bit less crazy, but equally as powerful, and it has to do with another ultimate that almost took place in the rework of a champion. This time with Xerath. And it was actually quite similar to the current ultimate that he now has today. In the early version of Xerath's rework, his ultimate was kind of like the same thing that it is now, but instead, it had literally 0 cooldown. And I don't mean like, oh, it had a really short 2-second cooldown. No, I mean literally a 0-second cooldown, with the only limitation being the 0.33 second delay between shots, and the mana cost, which was 20 mana per shot. It's a little bit unclear what the true specifics of the ability were, but it activated in the same way that it does now, in that he kind of sets up and then has to stand still while using it. It also probably had a bit shorter of a range and did less damage than Xerath's current ultimate today, but there's not much doubt that this ability was beyond insane. And to top it all off, the delay between shots was actually lowered with cooldown reduction. So you could be shooting these things out like crazy, and regardless of the range or damage, that is a whole lot of projectiles. Imagine like a Kog'Maw ultimate, but with a much smaller mana cost and shorter cooldown. With Xerath's huge range, this kind of ability gave him immense power, and so it was toned down and then probably toned down again and again and again, until it reached the current version of the ultimate that he received in his rework that is still in the game today. For our fourth ability, we're heading back into Crazy Land with Thresh's original ultimate. Riot Gypsy Lord commented on his time in developing when he helped Riot Certainly T work on Thresh, and one of the original designs for Thresh's ultimate was a targeted buff that you could cast on an ally. This buff would turn your teammate into an avatar of undeath, and would give them 60% cooldown reduction. But the kicker is that this cooldown reduction that was given to Thresh by an ally actually stacked with other forms of CDR from items or anything else. So in reality, if you had an ally that had 20% cooldown reduction from items, they would get 80% cooldown reduction. And if they had 40% cooldown reduction from items, well, you guessed it. They're going full sandbox mode with literally 100% cooldown reduction. Riot Light, watch out, as this Thresh ultimate was literally just that insane. And although we don't really know how long the buff lasted for, I'm sure it was long enough to cast your ultimate at least a few times, if not more. And the version of this ability that Rioters tested probably lasted long enough to get off around 8 or maybe even 10 or more ultimates if you had that 40% cooldown reduction. Needless to say, this ability was just mind-blowing, and although it might have had some potential in a different form or some kind of a different ability, I mean, the concept of giving your ally additional cooldown reduction is pretty cool, but 60% is way too much, and this ability was scrapped for, well, for being broken as hell. And for our fifth ability on the list, we're looking at one of our foxy friends, and not my man Foxtrap. Nope, this time it's Ahri. Although Foxtrap does have some crazy abilities himself, if you know what I'm saying. Anyways, Ahri was a champion released back in late 2011 that came with the launch of the Korea League of Legends servers, meaning that her development cycle took place during Season 1, perhaps even earlier, and since she was designed by Colt Hallam, aka Riot Ezreal. As the saying goes, if it's a Colt Hallam champion, it's an overpowered champion. And on release, Ahri was quite overpowered, but during her development, her ultimate went through a phase that I like to call the Kassadin phase, because that original design of her ultimate was essentially a Kassadin ultimate, in that she could travel all over the map as long as she had the mana. However, it was much more than a Kassadin ultimate. The mana costs were so much more forgiving, and the cooldown was shorter as well, to the point where that crazy lady was just flying across the entire map so long as she had the mana. Essentially, imagine Ahri's current ultimate, just with unlimited charges instead of 3. And if that's not insane, then I don't know what is, because that foxy lady had a little bit more bite than I ever want to face. Ahri's strong enough on her own already, but I mean, this kind of thing within her kit would be just mind-blowing. So those were some of my favorite abilities that could have existed in League of Legends, but I've actually got loads more, some of which, as well, are info that I kind of have exclusively, just like with the Fiora Ultimate, but let's keep that secret between you and me. So you can probably expect another video like this one in the future, and if you know about some crazy abilities, definitely post them in the comments, and I can look into those ones as well. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.